Hi everyone, my name is Macijeski. I teach in creative writing here at NSU. I'm also the creative writing program coordinator, and I'm excited to share some poems for you in this virtual recorded reading. And I figured it'd be fun to do things a little bit differently. So what I decided I'd do is kind of tell a little bit of my poetry publishing story by reading from some journals that my poems have appeared in and talking just a little bit about that. So to get started, I'm going to read the very first poem I ever had published. It's in this journal called Low Water Review back in 2012, and that was an exciting day when I got the news that this short little poem was published. So I'll read this for y'all. Fruit. Down row after row of the city market, basil and lemons sing. Their citrus fresh scent open-voweled in my nose as I pass by shopping for mangoes and great brains of cabbage. In early morning, I carry my harvest of the dead, haul ripening oranges and limes the 12 blocks to my dinner table. I place their mottled roundness on the worn oak slab and watch them wobble towards stillness, scattering in constellation. All this trouble for fruit. All this trouble to slice these neon globes into hemispheres and imagine eating the earth from the inside. Yay, poem number one. I think it's interesting to hear folks talk about their publishing history because, you know, we don't always talk about how that happens. So the next poem I'm going to read is also from earlier in my publication history. And this poem was rejected 37 times before it found a home in this journal. And I think that's an interesting perspective because this is a poem I believed in, I didn't want to give up on. And it finally found a home in 14 Hills, the 2014 edition. It's this journal put out by San Francisco State University. This poem is titled Blackberries. The first funeral I attended was for a woman missing 2 fingers on one hand. I never learned how she lost them, but she used that hand to pick blackberries with me, feeling through thorns toward the dark clusters, teaching me into the leaves. I'd watch her fill her basket in wonderful asymmetry before she died. The absences of several knuckles moistened over with purple juice, my first introduction to beauty in the abnormal. I ate the fresh globules of blackberries straight from the bush with my whole achingly unison hands. I wanted my body to have a story. I wanted to have lived with so much of myself that pieces of me would break off, scatter into miniature selves, bits of finger or nail trimmings finding their way out into a broader mystery. I wanted the earth to hold on. I wanted us to stay there, to keep picking, each berry twisted from its stubborn neck collected into my small bucket. I counted how many words I had gathered, looked down at them shining, wondered what purple alphabet they would spell in my stomach long after they had spoken across my tongue, and traveled the long narrative from seed to food, long after each of us slept, holding the memory of blackberries in our bodies. So I was really happy that that poem finally found a publication home. And then it was really cool. A couple years later, I submitted it to this small press anthology that was publishing this really cool collection called Bramble and Thorn. And here's the cover. It's this beautiful kind of handmade small edition run cover, Bramble and Thorn by Porkbelly Press. And the theme of this anthology is kind of hard to encapsulate in a small space, but it's this idea of sort of wild women and fairy tales and kind of mystical exploration, things like that, wildness. And Blackberries was reprinted again in this anthology, which was really exciting. But another poem appeared alongside it, which is really cool. And this poem comes from a series I was working on where each title of the poem in the series kind of starts in the same way. It starts with the word because, and it's kind of a satirical or ironic play on like answering a question, some kind of question about why I am the way I am or why I'm not a certain other way. So this short poem in this beautiful handbound edition is titled Because of Wolves, because more than anything. I crave a wildness in silence, a freedom in it, the kind of mind a wolf has, strong and sure, made well, fitted into the skull frame for skill and clarity, swiftness. No clumsiness of words and days and what we fill them with. Only the ear focus of a bird whistle, a mouth tightening around a mouse, teeth sunk into the softening. The sureness of it all, the fogged sound of snow under paws, my body enrobed in my body, hidden in the grand stillness in the trees. The blood of my honest kill spilling in snow, the same flash of cardinals maneuvering in the pines. So next I'm moving on to a couple poems that I wrote and saw published when I was working on my doctoral degree in Nebraska. And these poems come from a different kind of project. They're the first poems I had published that came from sort of a longer narrative collection of poems that I had been working on at the time. They appear in Sycamore Review, which is this really great review that comes out of Purdue University. And these two poems, I'll read them together. They both kind of orbit around this central figure that I've written through named Virgil, who's kind of a mythical fiddler who moves around in the Dust Bowl era in America. And I was kind of playing with the idea of fiddling and Americana and nostalgia and sort of the problematic things that have to do with those themes. But also it just felt really cool to see these two poems published at a time when that felt like really new work for me. So it was really cool to see them have a life in this journal that also published a bunch of other poets and writers whose work I was really excited to see in community with mine that way. So these two poems, again, have to deal with this character named Virgil, who's a fiddler in the Dust Bowl America, who's kind of maybe a little bit magical, maybe a little bit real. The first poem is Hear. Hear Virgil. Hear Virgil's tunes. Hear Virgil's tunes gathered together, warming themselves by the campfire that storytelling makes. Hear them collecting. Hear them bringing dried leaves first, then twigs, then small branches, then larger branches, then hulking logs. Hear them building the fire, a fire only hardy, sturdy tunes can manage. Hear them roasting meat on the ends of rusty weapons as the sun goes down, and hear how they eat. Hear Virgil coming by with a six-pack. Hear Virgil opening up the beers and setting them down for his tunes, each one a potent amber question. Listen. Listen to them myth-making as they're eating their meals. Listen to the birthright in their voices, their histories echoing into the cold night. Listen to the fire, elemental and crackling. Listen to beasts howling in an unnamed darkness. Listen to the tunes' heavy boots on the dirt. Hear the fire wisping to smoke as they put it out. Hear music lingering in the embers. Hear Virgil and his tunes gathering their cans. Hear them marching to the woods, the moon following them. Hear Virgil's tunes making camp, asleep in tents with the bow by their side, still bivouacking in their dreams. So next I'll read the other poem that appears here, and it's really cool. I wanted to show you. I think this is also the first journal where more than one of my poems was accepted at the same time, and they appear side by side, kind of across the gutter of the page, which is really fun to see that. Virgil's pockets. They may not be deep, but they are full. He packs the front and sides of his coveralls with rubber bands, matchsticks, pennies, turnips, train schedules, bottle caps, and Lizzie Borden, his switchblade. She's good at peeling apples and gophers. Sometimes he uses the point to scratch stories into river rocks, little stick heroes and stick dogs leaping over each other through slate, back to the time of the beasts he carries with him in his distant blood. He fills their mouths with teeth, puts weapons in their hands, scrapes fish for the hungry dogs as water laps up across their primitive myth, obscuring them in the river's murky vault. So I have a couple more journals I want to read from. This next one, I'm looking at it as I'm preparing my remarks. I guess it was winter 2017 that I had a poem appear in Puerto del Sol, which is another journal that I was really excited to be published in. You know, taking a look at the back where all the lists of other, you know, poets and writers who are included. It was fun to see my name there. And this issue I enjoy for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I wanted to share in this reading today is this is an issue themed around publication. So themed around this idea of what it means to publish, what it means to share your work. So all of the pieces in this issue engage with that conversation or that idea in some way. So I'll share my poem that's included in that conversation, titled Searching Through Old Albums for Something New. So the idea of the poem is I'm kind of starting by looking at photographs and thinking about alternate selves. Searching through old albums for something new. I want to live a life with such attention that stories grow on my bones, that people will remember the pearled shapes of them in the charnel houses of their hearts. I want my death to be like the tidiness of a sleeping cat, her limbs gathered like firewood for a slow burn in dreaming. But what I really look for in the gloss of these photographs are answers to questions I don't know yet, longings that have no names. The thing is, these windows are old. They open onto selves I've birthed my way in and out of over and over. Today, maybe, I'll invent a new origin, build a tidy alpha without stressing the omega. Maybe I was born in Sacramento or Canada or Jersey, whichever tells better. I was premature. I was late. I was 10 pounds, 8 ounces. I didn't cry when I met my new world. I laughed, and my laughs burst the air open into butterflies, the hospital filling with silent paper wings and their colors catching the light. Linoleum and monitors never seemed so alive. I was a boy. I was a girl. I was neither. I arrived with secret codes already in my head, information about heart murmurs and thumbnails and the promise of chocolate flooding my tongue first, then my mind. And my toes were all rightly formed, or there were 12, or 9, or no one could tell until they took the socks I came with off and saw the truth the little yarn lambs were hiding. Or it was more like my mouth yelled open a new sentence after the period drawn in place last generation. And the words were good because they weren't words, but an endless stream of sound feelings. Each its own horn my hands fought to grab onto, to keep from toppling my new raft of love and light. Adrift in the bright ocean, the morning windows spread across tile, blankets, my mother's knees. So I'll end by reading a couple poems that appeared pretty recently in an issue of Conduit, which is this really fun journal that comes out of Minnesota. And I don't know if the video can show, but it's this interesting format. It's really tall and really long. And this issue is themed around the idea of underground, beneath, below, and beyond. So there's a way in which all the pieces in this issue kind of engage with this idea of what's underneath things, what's below, what's beyond, kind of getting below the surface. And it's also really fun because there aren't page numbers to indicate each page in this journal. Instead, there's a word, so they kind of appear in alphabetical order. And 2 of my poems were accepted for this issue, and I really enjoy the fact that they appear on pages heart and hoard rather than, you know, page 30 and page 31 or something like that. But I'll end with these 2 poems because I think I just like them today, so that's why I'm going to end with them. And I think they also kind of have an interesting conversation they make with each other. And these also come from that collection I read one of earlier, where each title of each poem starts with the word because and is kind of a play on answering some question about myself. Because imagination is all about reclaiming what we know so we can better build what we love. My brain is a calm woman in a long life who waits for guests to come eat the soup she's nursed for hours. She'll give them steam in bright orange bowls. My brain comes from generations of quiet, for better or worse. Our work was quiet. The little moments we made in our lives with our hands to get the hard stuff done was quiet. This is my inheritance. My brain likes to look at old pictures of itself before it was formed, when it was a seed, an unwritten note, a handful of mud craving electricity. My brain is a galaxy clustering the black hole of my first thought, an unearthly spinning. My brain spends a part of each day inventing histories. Whole libraries are crowded with these inventions. In one of them, money doesn't exist and kindness is our moral currency. Everyone is wonderful at listening. When I push myself, when I look down the long tunnel of my remembering, I see my brain as a murmuring crowd, indistinct noises and fabric shifting under the moon my stare makes. This keeps happening. My brain loves what Emily Dickinson says about us, that we are wider than the sky and sea, that part about our minds reaching into the natural world to gather what we know, to gather simple evidence of what we love, an apple, a dropped feather, a leaf, a bit of snow, and turn these things back over and over in our hands until they're polished, until they're memories, until their disappearance buries them forever in the warm loam of our thinking. And a final poem I'll share today. Because some days I imagine some bit of me is Emily Dickinson. I wake to my white dress with white sleeves, with white flowers out my window, waving me hello out of sleep. I choose each day what to see, what to hear, what to let in, and what to keep out, what to keep miraculously out. I choose to keep the sky in my brain blue, to keep it listening for birds that rustle and trees that drop their little deaths to the ground. Maybe today I'll walk the garden to see blooms look up at me, yellow smudged on their faces. I'll gather bundles of them, like the words in poems, like days in a month. Every day I'll write the book of me. Yes, I've decided. Every day will be another page I teach myself how to read. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Shea Montgomery. I teach comp and creative writing at NSU, and I figured tonight, since it was a fall read, I'd read some Halloween-themed poems. These will come from a collection that I've written dealing with the Addams Family and the Munsters. Therefore, my Addams Family Funkos will be joining us. Gomez and Morticia. 5 poems, the first of which is called It's Alive. It deals specifically with the Munsters. Eddie is flunking science. The news just came in last night, and some of the teachers are already howling. They want Eddie to be expelled. Bad grades and trouble in class, a poster child for poor environment, a problem better fixed by never seeing it again. Herman punches a hole through the wall, towards the throats of those that say his son doesn't deserve a chance, and while icing his fist, he tells Eddie he has to get an A on the science project. Hopefully that will turn things around. Then he asks what the project is, anyway. A robot. A robot? A robot. Well, it better be able to get you a job at NASA. Eddie goes to his room to work on this thing he actually has control of, made of buckets, funnels, and cans. Grandpa hears the clanking in his room, wanders down the hall to see Eddie working, remembers working on engines during the war, being scared while he was doing it. At dinner time, Lily sees him in Eddie's room, thinks to stop him, lead him back to his bed, that he must be bothering Aunt Eddie, but perhaps they need to try a new medication. But she halts when she sees them, shoulder to shoulder, soldering fluidly, with purpose deep in the bowels of the machine. Her father is smiling. She hasn't seen him smile in years, and never at Eddie until now. So she lets them work, leaves dinner, 2 of them, outside the door, letting only the smell of food remind them to come and eat, for the first time in a long time, for the first time together. A social worker from the school drops by in the morning while Lily is in the basement folding laundry, and the rest of the family has left for the day. He rings the bell, knocks on the door, raises hell with his banging, and Grandpa finally hears, creaks his way down to the door, opens it, and asks what he wants. He says his name is Jerry. He's here to see Eddie's home, to see if his family is loving enough to attend school in this district, that it's a tall bar that's been set in Eddie's case due to wealth, the number of free lunches needed, and finally his grades. Grandpa's eyes light up. He tells him not to worry, leads him up to Eddie's room to show him their robot, tells him Eddie will one day work for NASA, that he gets to leave this world behind. He'll see. But Jerry only sees a messy room, an old Playboy halfway under the mattress, and a mess of buckets the shape of a man with pots for arms and knives for fingers. This is it? Yes, it will chop vegetables for astronauts. It's crap. It has no life, no movement. Lily comes up the stairs then. She's heard the talking, arrives just as Grandpa is telling Jerry that he used to kill guys he called Jerry in the war. She helps to ease him out the door, gently holding Grandpa as he raves. Jerry, the goose-stepping bastard, wants to kill them. Spittle runs down his chest as he screams for more ammo, the entirety of Jerry's short jog down the driveway. That night, Eddie and Grandpa work to spring life to their creation. They name it Spaceman because Grandpa believes in the old ways and tells Eddie life begins with a name. Then they build it organs, those muscles of life, with the odd pieces they find around the house. A blender for a heart, a gas tank becomes a stomach, a dictionary and math textbook taped to the inside of a bucket become a brain, and a series of random wires and cords run through the arms and legs give it strength, as Eddie prays over the last transfusion of red, watery power-steering fluid they found to act as blood. In the morning, Spaceman makes them all breakfast, carefully flipping the bacon before it burns and singing while it works, a last-minute edition of old tunes Grandpa taught it from the days of his youth, songs he listened to in foxholes, bunkers, battles, and all the times he wondered if he would get to go back home. Spaceman is whistling My Little Buttercup to itself as Herman comes down to eat. It gently flips pancakes on his plate, then pours some orange juice. Red-eyed and still tired, he looks at it, calls it silly, but is happy it will most likely get Eddie that A. He doesn't notice Grandpa at the table for the first time in years. Grandpa smiles at the faces surrounding him, slowly bobs his head to the flavor of a pleasant breakfast in the company of family. He even doesn't get angry when Herman walks out to the car to go to work without another word, because he knows vaudeville isn't dead yet. In fact, it's just getting started. The next one's about the Adams, who are infinitely more wealthy than the Munsters in this work. This one is entitled How to Influence People. On Fridays, Morticia feeds her flowers in the garden, careful to stroke their thorny backs when they choke on their food, while Gomez watches the neighborhood through his telescope. Today it's the Munster family, across the street, pinned by his gaze, his eye refracted to the size of a god's as he peers through the eyepiece. He watches, announces that they should invite the Munsters over to play bridge, as a way to cross the gap between them, introduce themselves, show off their souls of graciousness and charm. So they send Pugsley across the street with invitations, while Morticia prepares her prize toad fricassee, and Gomez polishes the silver. Lurch is playing his finest tunes on the harpsichord when the Munsters arrive, and they all sit in the candlelit game room, cards in hand, as Morticia and Lily trade recipes, compliment dresses, and Herman and Gomez take shots of tequila, both savvy enough players to realize the other is bluffing through the cigar smoke that hangs in the air above them. As they play, Gomez notices Herman's eyes wander toward his prize marlin, and he asks if he is a fisherman. Herman says he would like to be, but he hasn't the time to be one. So drunkenly, Gomez tells him that if it's on the wall, it's on the ball, and he must already have what it takes. So he wants him to have it as a housewarming gift. Fellow fishermen should stick together, he says, or so he had once read in a book. Then he tears the fish from the wall, stumbles to his toolbox, grabs a hammer, nails, and marches past them all across the street, through the Munsters' front door, and nails it up to their mantel like a martyr. He bends nails, smashes his thumb, but in the end turns to all the shocked faces that have followed him, every one of them, his shoulders square, his hammer firmly in hand, and declares it ties the room together. Don't they agree? He tells the Munsters he likes them as he wipes blood off his hands. They could be his kind of people. never half full. Grandpa wanders out some nights. Some nights they catch him on the way out, others not. Those are the terrifying nights. Once it was 2 days until they found him in the old neighborhood, the one they knew. Grandpa wanders out one night when Herman is in the living room reading. He wanders around, Herman ignores him, believes he'll tire, but finally has to stop him when he opens a window, tries to get out, fights back when Herman tries to pull him back in, screams that Herman may be used to it being hot where he was from, but he'll be damned if he was going to roast to death in a hot house in the middle of the summer. Herman drags him in, and Grandpa takes off a shoe, throws it through the window. There, now it has to be open, he cackles maniacally the whole way down the hall as Herman gets him back to his room. The entire house settles, and finally the family tries to get back to sleep. Grandpa wanders out another night, or morning actually. He got up before everyone else, put on his suit, and left. Herman threw the alarm clock through the wall that morning. He'd been signed up for overtime, now had to spend it searching for a man he didn't even like, searching for a man that apparently no one had seen, as he wandered up the streets of this new neighborhood, asking anyone, everyone, couples working in the driveway on projects that seemed to become less important, then suddenly being back inside whenever he is around. So Herman looks for Grandpa alone. Grandpa wandered out that day, but they had found him by the afternoon. Lily had met Herman with the car. They had shared a quick lunch at the corner burger store, our eyes darting at faces and figures across the street, on the sidewalk, anywhere they thought they might see him. Lily always said he could be anywhere, and that word never seemed so heavy as when they said it then, anywhere. They had finished eating, gone back to the car, spent a half hour searching the parking lot at the zoo, as sometimes that's where he ended up. Not this time, though. They had turned around to return home. Eddie would be home from school soon. He could help in the search, and then Grandpa appeared on a street corner near the garden. He'd set up a magic act for people walking by near an honest-to-goodness payphone. He stood behind a dirty box covered in motor oil with a tin can full of dry grass he'd stacked up next to his stage. The Domino Club was open all night, he would pronounce, then catch the grass alight with a Zippo he'd picked up God knows where. Herman had jumped out of the car, in traffic, as they drove by. Lily had to turn around across 2 lanes, but she'd done it. She pulled up just as Herman was getting an arm around him. He was wearing his suit jacket, but no pants, and he was so cold. But they warmed him up on the way back home. They had brought blankets, blasted the heater. They got him home and in his bed before Herman broke his silence. Told Lily that the thing that bothers him most when her father gets out, does these things, is that sometime the cup he puts out for tips actually has money in it. Going back to the Addams family, specifically focusing on Wednesday, who is a main character in the entire work. Pandora collects her things. Morticia combs Wednesday's hair with her favorite cactus brush. It had been a while, but she'd found her still, sitting in her room, and she hadn't objected to the initial contact. Fester bursts in, screaming he hasn't seen Thing since last night, that Thing owes him a massage. He's disappeared into his box, won't come out. Wednesday slides out from Morticia then, starts to dig under her bed as Lurch announces lunch. After eating, the family searches for their missing thing. Morticia even posts an ad in the paper. Missing thing, ample reward. Bring to 0001 Cemetery Lane. Someone was sure to react to that if they saw thing. Then Wednesday walked down the stairs with a box. She set it down on the table in front of them, pulled the top off like a master revealing an intricate tool to a student, shows them the limp form of Thing laying blue and lifeless on a bed of lace, burned at the edges, a tourniquet still wrapped around the wrist of its neck. She looks them all in the eye as they stand there, tells them she is sorry, that it was an accident, that Thing had just not held on hard enough, that all she wanted was to feel someone with their hand in her hair, like Perseus with Medusa. The final poem I'll read is called Clean. Again, it's about the Addams. Gomez is relaxing, enjoying a cigar, when Pugsley tells him he needs money. His father asks him how much, 100, 2, 1,000? No matter, tell his mother. She'll write him a check. Pugsley stands up straight, chooses his words carefully, deepens his voice to enhance the gravity of what he says next, then tells his father he wants to get a job in the city. He says he wants to work for a living. Gomez almost has a stroke right there. Stands up, looms over the boy like Vesuvius, ashes drifting down from his cigar just as they did in the painting of Pompeii that hung in their living room. He tells the boy Adams hasn't worked in 300 years. He accuses him of reading too much, wonders where they've gone wrong in giving him everything he could possibly want. He threatens to ground him, put him in a box until he comes to his sentence, for God's sakes. Doesn't he know what it's like out there? Pugsley holds his ground, says he wants to know what it is like to come home tired, dreadful of the morning, the facts of monotony a force to be lived with, like an old relative who refuses to die so that their room can be converted into storage. Gomez sees the steel in his eyes, knows his temper, that he won't be talked out of this, that he has to learn the hard way, be forged in the fires of a 9 to 5, honed by hour lunch breaks, ground to a fine edge by the possibility of a Christmas bonus. He asks Pugsley what he plans on doing, perhaps a shipping magnate or an astronaut. He could even be a good surgeon. They all knew how much he liked cutting things. Maybe this is just what he needed. Pugsley says he will clean houses, that he has thought it through. People will pay him to remove all evidence of their existence, move it to the curb to make way for him to polish what is left over after. He says he will put a lemony scent into rooms where people have died, wipe away the memory that they had ever even lived as he folds laundry, then dusts, or vacuums up crumbs while smiling, that wolfish grin only Adam's men possess. Gomez pats the boy on the head and tussles his hair. He knows his son will slowly erase the world, one face at a time, like a scalpel used too often, its blade shrinking through time and use, but its meaning and purpose always the same. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Oona Zbitkovskis. Most students know me as Miss Z, and I teach first-year writing, and I'm part of the creative writing faculty here at Northwestern State University. So I am going to do a little reading for you this evening, but I thought about doing it a little differently than I would normally do. Normally, as artists, we like to wait until our work is finished, except for, of course, with a select few, to show. We want the best that we can possibly do to be what we show the public. We want for you to see our work finished and polished. We want to feel proud of that. And I think that's great. I think that's exactly what we're all striving to. But it doesn't start out that way. So I thought it'd be really interesting, instead of reading you things that I believe are completed or finished, or I feel really proud of where they ended up, to read you things that I'm working on, to show you that we're all bumbling with word choice and repetitive language, that sentence structure sometimes doesn't play out the way we thought it would play out. You know, I often start writing things and have to put them down and walk away from them. I just don't know what else to do with them, or I can't seem to get it exactly like I want it. And sometimes I come back to them that day, and sometimes it's weeks, months. I've even left things for years. And sometimes things never end up where I think they're going to end up. They never end up completed. They never ended up finished. And then sometimes some of the things that I'm most proud of are things that I had to put away for a little while. So this evening, instead of reading you a bunch of things that I think are exactly like they should be, I'm going to read you a few samples of things that I feel encouraged about and want to get back to, want to see them meet the potential I think that they can. So the first one I'm going to read you is from a children's book that was inspired by the Just So stories. I always loved those stories as a kid, and the idea that certain attributes were given to animals because of maybe their attitude or situations. And I thought, wouldn't that be great if we applied that idea to the supernatural community, the mythological community? Like, how would that play out? And when I write children's literature, which I do often, I don't like to dumb it down, and I like to put it in a way that maybe sparks an interest in something else, something that they may want to research later or look up, or maybe something that intrigues them and becomes, you know, part of their advancing their knowledge, I guess. That's kind of a silly way to say that, but the best I can do on the fly. So anyway, I'm going to read you a bit of that, and this is about how dragons got their fire. So be kind. Remember that it is a draft. How the dragon got fire. It just so happens that dragons were not born with fire. It was later gifted them through a bit of dumb luck and being in the right place at the right time. For them, anyway. Magic, you see, is a wily thing that happens oftentimes in the most peculiar of ways. So I set out to re-educate on our most famous fire breathers. It just so happens that a knight, not a gallant knight, for this one was grumpy and full of himself, was out scouring for a way to advance his station when he came to the mouth of a huge cave. The cave was dark, and there was a great many scattered rocks about the opening. The knight, even though he was grumpy, had a bit of courage about him and decided that there might be unknown treasure hidden within the cave. So, being slightly brighter than some, he fashioned himself a torch from an old log, a bit of fabric, and some pitch that he carried about for just these types of occasions. He lit the end and proceeded into the cave, traveling farther and farther into the abyss with only his torch to light the blackness. Courage is a wondrous trait, but one must not let foolhardiness be mistaken for courage. Sometimes courage is knowing when to know you have overstepped and swallowing your pride. The knight, however, being quite full of himself, did not realize the difference, and so it was that he proceeded forward, even as the hair stood on the nape of his neck and a chill ran up his spine. He put one foot in front of the other and moved forward into unknown depths of the cave. And so it was that he walked this way, step by step, for quite some time, and was almost, but not completely, resigned to giving up and turning back. If he had stopped that very moment, I feel the story and much of history would have been much different. But then you know that by reading this, that he must not have stopped. He must have pushed through his doubt and taken more steps, or would not have a tale to tell. So it was that, and much to his detriment, he did move forward and around a somewhat sharp turn in the cave and came to a vast open area. It was huge, and with great delight he smiled smugly to himself that this had to be a find of epic proportion. For what could an area such as this be doing in a cave if not filled with secrets that were sure to make him renowned throughout the kingdom? So he quickly went to work to fasten another torch so he could further illuminate the room. And when he was quite done, he turned round, as he had had his back towards the majority, and what he saw there almost gave him pause. But with foolhardiness comes also ego, and he did not fancy himself in much trouble, for he felt that no creature that could outsmart him, as he thought he was quite clever and crafty. Even as his eyes took in the sight in front of him, his faith in himself did not waver. As the knight studied the creature before him, he could not help but marvel at its sheer size, and to think to himself what a great triumph this would make. It was definitely a dragon, and his body was long and covered with scales that looked hard and impenetrable, and his mouth housed razor-sharp teeth. The knight, however, was not deterred, and was convinced he would be the victor and reap the spoils, because everyone knew that where there was a dragon, there was a mighty treasure to be found. Now here is where I would love to tell you that an epic battle took place, one that would be told for generations to come, and that this knight fought valiantly and overcame his selfish ways and conquered the beast, saving the town and claiming his accolades. But that is just not the story I have to tell. What really happened was this. As the knight was strategizing to himself and picturing how he was going to get the dragon down to the kingdom as proof of his heroics, the dragon simply lunged forward and swallowed him whole, torch and all. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how swallowing the knight and his torch gave such power to this mythical creature. But you see, if you remember, back to the first of this tale, I told you that he was smarter than most, even though his ego and attitude lacked something to be desired. And the pitch he had concocted and used for his torch was of the utmost quality, and a bit of magic too. And so it was this torch, lit by this magic pitch, whose recipe died with the not-so-gallant knight, that gave the first spark, and this is how the dragon got his fire. Now, as you can see, there are lots of bumbles, words that sound similar, word choice I need to play with, sentence structure, but I like the story. I like where it's going, and I hope that cleaned up, it will make the impression that I want it to make. So I'm going to move on to, I write lots of different styles. Here's a book that I have been working on that's kind of like those self-help, silly help, do's and don'ts, affirmation books that kind of make you happy, and you have them maybe in your car, on your desk at work, when you just need to giggle a moment or just feel better, usually during finals when I have to grade 1,000 papers. So it's called Don't. Although there are some do's thrown in, and I'm just going to read a couple of those. And like I said, this is something I'm working on. It needs to be cleaned up, because when you have something that's really short, wording is very important. So some things need to be changed around and polished. And then, of course, this book will come with illustrations. So reading it isn't going to give you the full picture, but you can see where I'm going with it. Don't be a naysayer. Unless you are a horse, then neigh all you want. It is what you do. Well, that and menial labor, transportation of humans and possessions, munch oats, you get the idea. Don't eat the yellow snow. Even Frank Zappa knew that, and he was a bit batshit crazy. And he rocked. Don't smell it. Oh my fuck, smell this horrendous. Here, you smell it. No. When your person smells something out of the fridge and makes the face as they extend said item in your direction, asking for you to sniff to confirm ickiness, stand firm. Be resistant. No good can come of it. I know you will ignore this advice, but I had to try. Don't stop yourself from laughing, no matter where you are, loudly. Allow yourself the unbridled laugh that can totally consume you, that infects those around you, that makes people think you have gone off the deep end, lost your marbles, bought the farm. You will be better for it. Laughing is healing, and it's free. And let's see. Don't think about it. You don't really want to know what has happened in the motel bed and you find yourself sleeping in. Just let it go. And then for my last read, I'm going to read this little piece. And if you've seen any of these before, you've heard me talk about this. I often think we write things and maybe they're not always going to be brilliant pieces of prose or poetry. You know, maybe they're just kind of a way to get ourselves motivated. I think that sometimes these pieces turn into something really brilliant, but sometimes I think maybe there's some works that are just kind of for you, that kind of motivate you. I have lots of little pieces of writing that I really enjoy. It's not because they're brilliant or, you know, fantastic and that people are going to fall down when they read them and just, you know, weep in the streets, but they mean something to me. They make me happy. They make me smile. And I think that it's pieces like this that inspire us to go on to write other things. And it's not that these pieces can't turn out to be something great in the end, but it's almost, that's not what their purpose is. Their purpose is to inspire you, to get you writing, to push you forward. And then if later on they become something great, then that's just bonus, but they're for you. So I'm going to read you one of those. I did a series of I Want poems, and this is one of them. I want to be a B-flick, the B-side, the secret that only a few talk of. I want to slip past you unnoticed. I want to be seen from the corner of your eye. I want to haunt you, a figment, an idea, a lost thought. I want to be everywhere and nowhere and dull and more than expected, out of reach, out of sight, out of this world. I want to be a B-flick. So that's all I'm going to read for you this time. Like I said, do be kind in your questions that you're going to have a chance to ask as we are. I did show you some of my unfinished work, but I think it's important. I think it's important to see that we all have a process. And I also find that one of my editing quirks is that I like to read aloud. So just in doing this little this presentation or video, whatever you want to call it. I've actually got all kinds of notes that I'm now going to give myself. So maybe you've inspired one of these to become something more than it currently is. And for that, I appreciate it. So leave your questions, and I hope I can answer them. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, Oona Zbitkovskis, Miss Z, to all the rest of them. And y'all have a good day. Bye.
4 things about my father's father. When my grandmother was pregnant, her husband came home angry enough to hit her. She barricaded herself in her room with her wedding trunk. He shot through the door with the double-barrel shotgun. In 2nd grade, I was picked because of test scores for a free spot at the magnet school, which meant crossing the freeway to go to Morningside Elementary. Already then he had moved away, married another woman, but we went to visit him at summer, and my mother ushered me in front of this man I'd just met, had me tell him proudly where I'd be going to school. He said, "You can't go to school there. That's where all the black people are." Except he didn't say black people. I must have heard the word before because I knew what it meant, but I'd never heard it used before, like how you might use a circular saw for a purpose. When his father was dying, my father arranged to visit. Time had not been kind. He was blind, missing a foot, prone to seizures that would kill him any day. The day he was to leave, my father got a call. His father said that he had never told his newest wife about his first marriage. He just wanted my father to tell anyone that asked that he was just an old friend, not even family. I was named after him. I have filed his name off of mine like a serial number on a gun. I would do anything not to be him. I would shoot holes in anything or anyone that said otherwise. I would use whatever tool I had at hand to draw a line between him and me. I will tell you, if you ask, that he's not my family. Hi, my name is Briseño, and I'm an assistant professor of creative writing here at Northwestern State University. Thank you so much for watching our faculty showcase reading. If it's all right, I'm going to read to you a little bit from my novel. So, this part's from the middle, and it's a sermon that the priest in town gives. Really, the only thing you'd have to know to really understand this is that he just read the part of the Bible that has the story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and if you don't know that part, basically, they were two Jewish people in Babylon who were who the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, said, if you don't admit that you hate your God, if you don't denounce the God of Israel, I'm going to throw you in this fire. And they said no. And so he threw them in the fire anyways, but they lived. That's the story. All right. Today, Father said, you heard the story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. I remember them because they are, to my reckoning, the 3 most unfortunate individuals in the Old Testament. Now, of course, that's a strong statement, and you might say to me that the Lord saved them, that he protected them from the fires of the furnace, the fires so hot that they claimed the lives of the would-be executioners. You could say to me that they remained unsinged, that they walked in the fire with the Holy Ghost, and that through them God and his faith came to many. And you'd be right. But I say to you that first they had to get there. They had to stand in the face of the furnace and be asked to do a very simple thing, to pretend to be something they weren't, to deny themselves. That's a sin we've all committed. Now in the Bible, it's 2 sentences. Nebuchadnezzar asks them, they say, throw us in the fire. But I think there's a lot that's left out there. I think you have to remember that these men were slaves stolen from their homelands, that they'd been away from home so long that even the writer of the Bible forgets their true names. You have to remember that Nebuchadnezzar had slain thousands for far, far less. You have to think about having been strangers for so long that only strangeness was familiar, and you have to think about how easy it would have been to bow, to prostrate, to tell yourself that on the inside, the real you isn't the one giving in. You hate this, but you're doing what you have to survive. And honestly, I'm not even sure God could blame you for it. Every part of you would call out to make not just the easy choice, but the logical one, the sensible. But instead, these three men chose faith, chose their word and their bond and their God, knowing what it meant, or at least thinking they did. They made that choice as they watched the furnace get stoked until it was like to melt. I think about how at every moment they could have changed their minds, that it was what even the king wanted. But for however long it took to prepare their death chamber, they held their faith like they were holding their breath. And then the miracle came. They were tied down and thrown into a kiln 7 times hotter than a blacksmith knew what to do with. And as they were thrown, their executioners caught flame and burned before their eyes. I do not know, and would say that no one really can what that next moment was like, but I'll tell you this, and it's the point I've been trying to get to. How much miracle can you ask for? Isn't even the smallest kind more than what any of us deserve? So when they were in that fire, God saved them, sent his own spirit to unbind their hands, sure. But do you think he included air conditioning? I wasn't there to know, but it seems like maybe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of those flames alive. Yes, protected by the grace of God, certain, but that doesn't mean anything, like they didn't feel the burn. No, rather, I expect that this miracle hurt, that it hurt quite a bit, that they felt their flesh crying to blister and pop even as God wouldn't let it. The more I think about it, the more I pray to never be given a miracle, because I'm not sure that I'm man enough to be a saint. I pray that I never see the face of God in the fire. Never. I imagine that I'm not the only one here who has taken to praying of late. I wanted to talk about this reading because that's just what this is, an answered prayer. This is what deliverance looks like. This, the face of grace and mercy. So when you pray, remember to thank God for all of everything. And when you suffer, as we all suffer, as we must, try, if you can, to be thankful, to wait in patience, and to bite down again on your faith against the sometimes searing pain. Remember that every pang might be your miracle, and that love and help must always serve not your interest, not your plans, but the greater interest, the plans of God and God alone. Thanks, y'all. So, I'm going to read one more piece, and this is a new one, something I've been working on for the last year or so. It's called Secret Letter to Yourself, to be opened only in the case of your country becoming a fascist state. If you're reading this, welcome to the part of your brain that writes secret letters to yourself. Please do not consider what it means that this letter exists, firstly because the mind is a thing past knowing and all that, but mainly because time is of the essence and has a new and terrifying meaning. You will find it obeys new laws now, slows and speeds based on different standards. Things that undeniably hurt people, the sort of thing that used to slow time down even when it only used to happen very far away, will force their way into existence at rates it is only normal to disbelieve. You will want to go back in time, or else far forward, and finding you can do neither will attempt to freeze in place. Everyone wants to remember where they were when it happened, it here being any number of eventualities that bear no dwelling upon. Dwelling upon eventualities is just what there's not time for. These new laws of time affect everything but gunshots, which are, as always, very fast and slow enough to seem infinite. But now each shot might be the shot, the one we will all be asked about years from now. Likely you have already imagined telling others what this was like. This is normal. The conversation as to whether the shot has already been fired is likely already ongoing. You have recently come to know two very important things. First, that you have come to live in a fascist state, and second, that part of you has been preparing for this for some time, hence the existence of this letter. Please know, as you discover your role in this uncertain future, whether you will fight or hide or both, that the most important thing and usually the hardest thing is to find a way to love the world enough to stay alive. Please know that this letter exists because there are things worth fighting for. You've known that all along. Take a moment and think of those things now. You need that. Please accept that even when you realize, like really realize, that you are and have always been writing this, yes, you, and that the rest of this will only be there if you reach to the deepest part of you and pull it out like a wedding ring lashed to a molar. Please accept even then that this is not just a stupid parlor trick or a shitty magazine story or a self-help gag. Or probably it's all of those things, but it's also this plan and what it implies, that you've known your whole life what to do just in case just this terrible thing should happen. It's all of it, exactly as it has to be. So here's what you're going to do. Thank you.